That thing over there is a special dairy for robotic milking of cows, which they don't want us to go into because you don't want to upset the cows. This is the University Meteorological site, and there's a number of instruments here that I'm going to talk about. But before that, I just want to explain why the site is here. There's been a site at Sutton Bonnington for over 80 years. It wasn't always here. The original site was moved 4 or 5 years ago when they started building the vet school. And the vet school was basically concreted over it. But the idea of a meteorological site is that it should be representative not just of the particular location, but of the wider region. So a site here is supposed to represent this end of the East Midlands. And so when choosing a site, you have to have good exposure, and as you can see, there's no buildings or anything, not even many trees in any direction, so it's very well exposed. When they moved the site, they actually did a comparison over 3 or 4 years to make sure that the move, which is about half a kilometre, wasn't actually changing the readings. Because if you think about how people are measuring climate change, a lot of it is based on weather stations. Weather stations have to move for various reasons, much like the sort of reason we've had to move this one. And you want to be sure that the data before the move and after the move is consistent. So there was a period of 4 or 5 years when they had overlapping observations and they found no difference, no appreciable difference whatsoever. So the site itself is very well exposed. There are rules about how far it should be from buildings and so on, and this site meets those criteria perfectly. It's also why I warned you about exposure, unnecessarily I think, on today, but you do find that because it's much more exposed, you do feel the cold much more here than you would anywhere else. Right, this is a climatological site. The readings here aren't actually used for the daily weather forecast because they're only recorded intermittently. At least they're not sent to the Met Office on a daily basis. What it's being used for is to provide background information about the climate of the UK, and we have quite a dense network of these sites around the place. The instruments you see on here are pretty much what you would see on. It's rather a noisy site. That is one thing to mention. If we don't have the trains, we have the aircraft. The main things measured at any meteorological station are temperature, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment, and rainfall. And these things here, this is a rain gauge, and basically it's a standard funnel, and it simply tips the rain into a bottle, and I don't know when it was last measured, basically the procedure is simply to come along on a daily basis, record how much water is accumulated, and that gives you the rainfall figure for the location. The rainfall can be quite variable because you can get a thunderstorm here that might not touch a place a couple of kilometres away. So rainfall is something you actually need to measure quite a lot. Daily readings of rainfall only tell part of the story. So this is also a rain gauge, and that silver-coloured machine there is also another one. These ones will be recording rain gauges. There will be some sort of mechanism, either electrical or clockwork, that records the amount of rain as it's happening, and from that you can actually get rainfall rates. So daily rainfall is okay for sort of working out how much moisture is available for crops, but it's not terribly useful if you want to predict floods. because for flood prediction you need to know what's the maximum amount of rain that you might get in half an hour, because that's the sort of condition that you get a flash flood. So the recording rain gauges fill that gap, and the early ones going back to Victorian times were based on clockwork and a pen going up a paper chart, and they would be changed once a week. Modern ones are mostly electrical, and most of the instruments on this site are actually sending electrical signals down into that hut where they're being recorded. Temperature is one of the key things to measure. We've got actually a number of temperature instruments on here. The key ones are actually in this box. This is a very, not just a white box, it's a particular thing called a Stevenson screen, which is designed. The problem with measuring temperature, I brought a box here. Inside that box would be something like this, which is a couple of thermometers. And the problem with instruments like this, if you have them outside in the sunshine, they're not only getting the temperature of the air, they're also getting heated up by the sunshine. And the idea of the box is to separate out the effect of, or to remove the effect of the direct effect of the sunshine and get you a measurement that is purely of air temperature. So it's a box with louvers to let the air through, vents in the top which are letting any air out, and the louvers are actually designed, there will be a separate set of louvers on the inside. They're basically designed to keep the light out, and then when you take the reading, the door is always on the north side, so that the sunshine, when you take the reading, you don't immediately let the sunshine in. The door's on the north side. In the northern hemisphere, the sun will always be on the southern side, so when you take the reading, you're not getting it contaminated by sunshine heating the thermometers. And there'll be several instruments in there, but basically they all measure air temperature. The other part of this thing is designed to measure humidity. It turns out one of the better ways, humidity is actually quite a difficult thing to measure, but it's quite important in terms of how the weather works. So one of the better ways of measuring humidity is actually to have a wetted bulb on the thermometer, and the evaporation from the wet bulb, so that there would be this is supposed to go inside that bottle. The bottle is supposed to be full of distilled water, and the evaporation from this wick creates a level of cooling that depends rather precisely on the amount of humidity in the atmosphere. And it actually gives quite a good measurement of humidity. Depends a little bit on wind speed, but that again can be dealt with in the calculations. And so the difference between what they call the dry bulb thermometer, which is simply a straight temperature measurement, and the wet bulb thermometer gives you a measurement of the humidity, and that's quite a reliable thing to measure. Now, traditionally, for manually human-run weather stations, the Met Observer would come out at a particular time of day, because again you want your observations to be comparable across the country. When I was a postgrad at Sutton Bonnington many years ago, and the regular observer went on holiday,